Hello everybody, this is Marty from Dawgs blog and the noontime report of the Frank Carson et al. Trial on Friday, February 15, 2019. Just for information, this is a week 39 court day 136. Court scheduled to start at 9:30 a.m. and the jury was up around 9:45. Judge on the bench maybe a minute or two later. PRAVEEN SINGH on the stand. Melissa Ferreira continuing her direct examination of PRAVEEN SINGH. She was asking him in regards to Frank Carson and his property on 9th Street. And in 2014, if he was aware that Robert Woody was taken into custody in this case, and he said yes, he called Frank Carson. He did not recall what Frank Carson had said. He refreshed with a transcript of the interview. He says that he recalled the call to Frank Carson said, and was telling him that somebody else was arrested for something that Frank Carson had done. And Frank Carson, he said, just cut him off and said, "I'll talk to you later." She went back to the comment that he said that Frank Carson said that he had taken care of the problem of the thefts. The issue had been taken care of, and he never talked about Corey Kaufman again, even though Corey Kaufman was not specifically talked about that previously. She went into an area about a complaint that was filed about Frank Navarro, and during this time there was 12 objections to her leading the witness that were sustained. Those were only the sustained objections. There's about 12 of them during this area of questioning. She was unable to get the questions out properly. He said he saw a complaint about Frank Navarro, and he had received it from Frank Carson at his office. He took the complaint to Turlock City offices as per Frank's request. He said he never read the complaint, but he said Frank Carson had complained in regards to the harassment on the Corey Kaufman case, but he didn't read the complaint. He says he has filed stuff at Turlock Police Department in the past. He did not recall if any of those were Frank Carson filings, but this one he said he did not file at the police department. He took it to the city offices. He couldn't remember the exact date when he filed the Frank Navarro complaint, and he said he had many conversations in regards to lawsuits. He had many conversations at multiple places with Frank Carson in regard to those. He said Frank Carson says you need to file the lawsuits in 2014. The lawsuits are filed to stop the harassment. Those conversations about the lawsuits to stop harassment, he says those were in around 2013 to 2014. Again, he said if the lawsuits were filed, it would stop the harassment. He said in 2012 to 2015, Frank Carson give you anything? That's the way she asked the question. It again, very leading. And eventually she got the question out, and he says yes. And she says, "What?" And PRAVEEN SINGH sat there with a very blank look on his face, and it didn't appear that he was really too sure about what to say. And his attorney objected and requested he talk to his client outside. So Jared Jordan, PRAVEEN SINGH's attorney, took him outside to talk, and then they went to a sidebar with Mr. Jordan, with all the other attorneys to talk to the judge. PRAVEEN SINGH came back in the stand. Melissa Ferreira asked him prior to August of 2015, when Frank Carson was arrested, you ever meet with Frank Carson in regard to some documents? He said yes. They had discussed it over the phone, and they had met on a neutral place on McHenry, and he gave PRAVEEN SINGH a bag with some documents in it. PRAVEEN SINGH said he took the bag and said Frank Carson said, keep the documents safe. She asked, did Frank Carson say why he gave him the bag? And he said, well, not exactly. But Frank Carson did say that to make sure no one gets a hold of it, it could send us to prison. Praveen Singh had put the bag at the office. He never told anyone else about the bag. He kept it in the cabinet in his office. And that was his office as plumbing supplies at 946 McHenry. She asked him if he let employees stay in the business at times overnight. Apparently they had a lounge area and some places where the employees could sleep. But no, the employees had no key to his office door, and he never looked in the bag or any part of that bag, he said. He said there was some unknown sketches, but he didn't look in the bag, but there were some sketches in that bag. And there was a photograph in that bag. The photograph was of Corey Coffin wearing a blue shirt. And Frank Carson never said when he would retrieve that bag. Said he never told the officers in the June of 2018 interview, or prior to that, anything about the bag. So he said there was a sketch and photo of Corey Coffin. It was a color photo with him wearing a blue shirt, just sitting there. Frank Carson never said why he had that. And the sketch of the people, and now he says looking around the room, it looked like the defendants in the courtroom, is exactly what he said. There was some writing on the sketch, but he did not recall exactly what it said. He refreshed with the transcript of the interview, and he recalled on the sketch the handwriting was Frank's handwriting, and there was the sketch and the photo. It looked like three guys standing there in a sketch that was hand drawn. It looks like the three guys that were in the courtroom right now, and a picture of Corey. And prior to his arrest in 2015, asked how close he was to Frank Carson. He's not really, maybe they're just a couple years that they had been getting really close. He said that Frank Carson had given him those documents prior to the arrest in 2015. He kept bags at several locations for a couple years, which totally contradicts what he just said. But he kept it in several locations for a couple years and never told anyone what he saw on the sketch. But he didn't look at in the bag, but he saw the sketches in the photo. He heard Frank Carson talk prior about a 4x8 piece of plywood with nails in it. In early 2013, he thinks there was a booby trap for anyone that jumped the fence to deter the thefts. She asked him if Frank Carson said anything else. He had put up lights and talked to, in regards to the plywood, asked if he talked to anybody else other than Frank Carson about the plywood. He did not recall. He refreshed. And he says he talked to Georgia DiFilippo. She had said something about property and traps on the property, but no specific things were said by Georgia. She asked him if he ever talked to Emil Atalaha. He said yes at his house during investigation. It was when the investigation was going on. He said it must be in regards to the investigation because he was wired when they met. Atalaha was wired. Emil said that the investigation, he had been questioned in the investigation about the homicide, and Frank Carson and wanted to know what was going on. Frank Carson says unknown for sure, but he says there's nothing to worry about. Nothing's happened on their part. They're barking up the wrong tree. She went back to about the bag that Frank Carson had given him. Frank Carson never came back for the bag. Praveen Singh does not know. Did not have he said a real good relationship with Frank Carson. He said no, not really good. ended when Frank Carson was arrested. He has had no contact with Frank Carson since. She asked him if he talked to Georgia DeFilippo, Christine DeFilippo, or any of the defense attorneys or anybody else involved. He said, no, I haven't talked to anybody. No further questions. So Marlissa Ferrer was done with her direct examination. The jury went out around 10:50 or so for a break, and we came back in 11:21. Percy Martinez started his cross-examination, and he asked him, he came forward in June of 2018 while the trial was going on. He initially said he didn't know that the trial was going on, but then he reversed himself and said following the case, he'd been following the case since 2015 when they were taken into custody, and he was following the case in the media, which included Dawgs blog specifically. He's asked if he knew Mike Monachia. He said no. He asked him if he's testified on a grant of immunity. He said the DA has given me nothing. There was objection. There was a sidebar. There was they were trying to work out a stipulation between the district attorney's office and defense attorneys. And Marlissa Ferrer was trying to stipulate that he was given immunity in his testimony. The defense attorneys objected to the wording that she used. So they all stepped. The judge sent them all outside to confirm the stipulation. Marlissa Ferrer again tried to orate the stipulation about the grant of immunity by the DA's office. Objection again to the way it was being said. Judge takes them all into chambers. When they came back out, the judge told the jury that all attorneys stipulate that he is testifying to a grant of immunity and that grant of immunity is by the district attorney's office, and all the defense attorneys did agree to that stipulation. So Percy Martinez asked him how old he was. He said 39 years old, and he says, so in 1982, he says, you were what, 3 years old? He said, yes. He says, well, you were still wearing diapers. There's objections to that, of course. So he says from 1982 to he last saw Frank Carson again in 1992 is when he was charged with offense. So he didn't see him for 10 years. Then again in 1995, he saw Frank Carson at J and 11th Street. He said it was at his office. Frank Carson had a law firm. He says he believed he had a partner at 11th and J. Sounds like the public defender's office. Percy Martinez asked him if he ever went to Frank Carson's house between 1982 and 1995. He said no. Nor Frank Carson had gone to his house. He asked him if from 1995 to 1995, if sometime in that time period that he had come to Frank Carson for a ticket he received for too low of a vehicle or something. But he said he did, but Frank Carson did not represent him. He never went to the 15th Street office until he was charged in a case in October of 2000. He said he had been there prior, but he didn't recall when. But he did go there in 2000 to get represented. He was asked in between 1998 and 2000, had he any dinners for Thanksgiving with Frank Carson? He said no. Did he have any social interaction after that ticket contact that he had in 1995? He says no. In 10 of 2000, Frank Carson charged him $4,000 to represent him. There was an objection, and actually Singh had said something to the effect, well, he charged me more than that. And then they ended up with a DA's objection. It was a sidebar. He was asked if he hired Frank Carson to also represent his brother. This is after the sidebar, of course. And he had gone to see Frank Carson. There was an objection to the brother question, so that was moved aside. He said he went to see Frank Carson by himself in the year 2000. and Frank Carson got the case dismissed. He says, would you lie to keep out of prison? He says, no. Percy Martinez asked him, did several interviews. Did you lie in September of 2013? He says, no. In the November 2000 interview again, did you lie? He did not recall. He refreshed that. He did not recall the date of that interview, and they refreshed him with that. And he asked if he lied in that interview. There's an objection to that. Tell any of the lies in any interviews. Objection to that. In a November, and I forget which year it was, the interview with Kurt Bunch, he said he wanted a deal to brush aside his cases and what he said was brush him under the mat. He pledged to tell all the truth, and he said, yes, that's true. I went to Kurt Bunch and said he wanted to take care of my cases and tell all the truth. He attempted to disclose information in regard to Frank Carson's clients. He had worked as a private investigator in those cases and attempted to tell information on his investigation. He denied that. He said, no, that's not true. He asked if he attempted to give information on a Mr. Smith. He said yes. And Frank Carson was the attorney on the case. Another sidebar, things start getting very contentious. Mr. Singh is not too happy right now. Marlissa Ferreira is not too happy about right now. After the sidebar, he said, well, he wasn't trying to get information on Mr. Smith. But he asked, and Percy Martinez asked him if he had been aware of details on clients and wanted to give notes to Kurt Bunch. He said no. He told they were Frank Carson clients to help himself. He said no. He was asked if he had those notes. He said, yes, I still have those notes on those cases. But he had told the investigators that his boat is sinking. He's not going down with Frank Carson. He said, yes, he said that. Frank Carson did something. He said that Frank Carson did something that they did not know about. And he said, yes, he told him that. But he also told him, I don't know shit on Corey. You guys have something on me, and I need a deal. Yes, he said that to Kurt Bunch. He said that Frank Carson had put him in this position, and his brother was also in custody and needed help. That was it for the morning session. It's going to get very contentious this afternoon with defense doing cross on PRAVEEN SINGH. We'll be back at 1:30 with a jury coming back up at 1:45, I believe. A couple of issues to be talked about when we go back up. Don't forget the podcast tonight.